There are very scary places in the world that you wouldn't want to step into, like the Sablinskaya caves, where a tribe of ferocious cannibals hide, the cursed island in Mexico where doll heads hang everywhere, or the Aerolíneas Argentinas plane, commanded by a ghost crew. Join us on our journey to discover some of the most sinister places in the world. In the city of San Jose, California, there stands a grim and colossal building spanning an enormous 20,000 square meters. The Winchester Mystery House. It is one of the most mysterious and implausible constructions in the world. The origin of this story is quite grim and dates back to the creation of the Winchester rifle. The Winchester was one of the deadliest weapons during the conflicts between Native Americans and Americans in the 1860s. In 1880, William Wirt Winchester inherited his father's company, which had turned into a multi-million-dollar enterprise thanks to the famous rifle and other subsequent weaponry. As if cursed, William passed away just 1 year later at the age of 43, leaving his wife Sarah alone. She inherited an immense fortune of about $20 million at the time, equivalent to around $500 million today, and also received a substantial daily income of $1,000, which would be roughly $25,000 in current value. After her husband's death, Sarah's mind completely unraveled. The couple had already lost a daughter at just 4 weeks old, and with William's passing, Sarah was left utterly heartbroken. She sought a logical explanation for her misfortunes, but overwhelmed by grief, was unable to find one. Thus, she decided to search for answers in the paranormal world. The grieving widow sought out a medium for guidance. The witch told her she was cursed for profiting from the deaths of so many people, and that the spirits of those who had perished at the hands of her husband's family's weapons would haunt her for the rest of her life. To avoid an early death, the medium advised her to build a house. Not just any house, but a home for the dead, who would leave her in peace as long as the building was never completed. Thus, in 1884, Sarah Winchester acquired a large plot of land in San Jose, which already had a small 8-room farmhouse. She hired a legion of workers who began remodeling the house. It was to be a house where work would never cease, every single day of the year, until Mrs. Winchester's death. Sarah feared that if she didn't personally oversee the construction, the spirits would come after her. She decided to manage the project herself. From that modest farmhouse, she built an enormously ostentatious structure. At one point, the house reached 7 stories in height. However, after the Great San Francisco earthquake of 1906, the structure suffered severe damage, and workers had to demolish much of the building. Sarah interpreted this as a message from the spirits. Today, the house stands at a maximum height of 4 stories. Sarah's obsession with ghosts also led her to have many parts of the house torn down and rebuilt repeatedly. She ordered the installation of strange traps to confuse spirits, doors that led to blank walls or even to the outside, but on upper floors without balconies, peculiar interior windows such as windows set into the floor, staircases that led nowhere, and nonsensical turrets. The result was a true labyrinth. Mrs. Winchester had extensive knowledge of rituals, symbolisms, and encryption techniques. Many of the seemingly irrational designs in the house carried hidden meanings. For example, she believed that the number 13 would protect her from death. As a result, the house has 13 bathrooms, one of which can only be reached by climbing a staircase with 13 steps, and features 13 windows. The entryway flooring is divided into 13 sections, and Sarah's bedroom has a closet with 13 hooks where she hung 13 dresses for her spiritualist sessions. There are also 13 glass domes in the house. Even her will was divided into 13 sections and signed 13 times. Sarah's eccentricities never subsided. In fact, they worsened. It is said that she always covered her face with a dark veil so no one would ever see her. Allegedly, she never slept in the same room 2 nights in a row to keep the spirits from finding her. She even built a seance room to communicate with the dead. On September 5, 1922, at the age of 82, Sarah Winchester passed away. after spending 38 years building her house for the dead. By then, she had invested over $5 million in the house, equivalent to about $70 million today. All of Sarah's belongings were inherited by her niece, Mrs. Marion Merriman Marriott, who had become her personal secretary in Sarah's final years. Her niece took everything she wanted and sold the rest in a private auction. Supposedly, it took 6 trucks working 8 hours a day for 6 weeks to remove all the furniture from the house. The mansion itself was sold at auction to a local investor and later rented for 10 years to John and Maine Brown. Just 5 months after Sarah's death, they opened the mansion to the public. Far from scaring people away, the mansion was transformed into a tourist attraction, the Winchester Mystery House. Guided tours through the building began shortly thereafter. Even so, it is not advisable to walk alone through the Winchester house. The mansion is so vast that at the time, workers and servants needed maps to navigate it. The current owners warn that if someone ventures alone and gets lost inside, they might never be found again. The story of Sarah and her mansion is so captivating that in 2018, a horror movie based on it was released, Winchester, starring Helen Mirren. For many years, visitors to the mansion have reported that the place is both impressive and eerie at the same time. Many also claim to have heard voices when no one was around, or felt a strange drafts in areas with no open windows or doors. And you, would you dare to take a walk through it? Surely many of you have heard of the Bermuda Triangle, a void in the middle of the sea plagued with mysterious disappearances and inexplicable accidents. But do you know exactly where it is or what has happened there? And most importantly, how much truth lies behind this paranormal phenomenon? The Bermuda Triangle is a vast geographic area in the Atlantic Ocean, shaped like an equilateral triangle, with its vertices extending from the Bermuda Islands to Puerto Rico in the US city of Miami in Florida. By connecting these 3 points with an imaginary line, the area forms a triangle approximately 1,800 kilometers on each side, about the size of Colombia. Situated southeast of the United States and north of the Caribbean islands, the region experiences heavy traffic from ships and aircraft. Historically, vessels passed through this area to take advantage of the Gulf Stream's winds and currents. However, those same currents bring highly unstable weather, with frequent hurricanes posing a significant danger to navigation. In the 15th century, Christopher Columbus crossed this region and reported seeing a great flame of fire crash into the sea, followed weeks later by a strange light in the distance. But the event that cemented the triangle's mystery occurred much more recently. On December 5, 1945, Flight 19, a squadron of 5 TBM Avenger bombers, departed from Fort Lauderdale, Florida for a routine training exercise. The weather appeared stable, and the planes had been recently inspected. However, a few kilometers off the coast, the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, began reporting that everything looked strange, even the ocean. Shortly afterward, radio contact was lost, and the aircraft vanished without a trace. A PBM Mariner seaplane was then dispatched to the area to search for the remains of the bombers. However, the rescue plane and its 13 crew members also vanished inexplicably. In the official report, the Navy attributed the incident to unknown causes. But the incidents didn't only occur in the air. Another famous case was that of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a cargo ship with 39 crew members on board. The last message received from the vessel was a routine transmission sent on February 4, 1963. A few days later, a life jacket and several pieces of wreckage were found along the coast. Despite rescue efforts, neither the ship nor its crew were ever located. The media began to report on these strange events in the area, referring to it as the Devil's Triangle. However, the triangle gained worldwide attention with the 1974 publication of the bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle by American author Charles Berlitz. In the book, the paranormal researcher compiled many more cases, hundreds of disappearances of planes and ships, claiming they proved something unusual was happening in the area. The book sold 20 million copies in more than 30 languages, sparking a global obsession with finding an explanation, logical or otherwise, for these strange occurrences. Theories ranged from alien abductions and portals to other dimensions, to the presence of survivors from the lost civilization of Atlantis at the ocean floor, whose advanced technology interfered with human navigation instruments. More scientific theories also emerged, such as anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field that could disrupt navigational compasses, or methane gas bubbles released from the seabed that could sink ships within minutes. One study even suggested that waves up to 100 feet high could occur in the area. The truth, however, is that much of the Bermuda Triangle theory is based on half-truths. Investigations by other journalists, such as fellow American Larry Kushke, revealed that Charles Berlitz had fabricated or exaggerated some cases to add more mystery to his book. These manipulations included changing weather conditions from bad to good or relocating incidents to the triangle that had not actually occurred there. Common sense tells us that with so much air and sea traffic, it's not surprising that so many accidents occur. In fact, the major marine insurer Lloyd's has determined that the accident rate in the Bermuda Triangle is similar to other areas near the equator, and it does not charge any extra fees for ships passing through it. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, also doesn't acknowledge the triangle's existence, which is why it doesn't appear on maps. We are sorry to burst your mystery bubble, TikTakers, but the truth is that while the Bermuda Triangle theory doesn't generally hold up, many specific cases of accidents or disappearances remain unexplained. So we encouraged you to read more about them and try to find the answers. Who knows? You might stumble upon an even greater enigma. Although Mexico is full of paradisiacal places, there is one that evokes more terror than any other feeling. In the middle of a swamp, plastic baby heads hang everywhere. We are talking about the Island of the Dolls, located in the Xochimilco marshlands, in the southern part of Mexico City. Many chinampas, a type of artificial island formed by rafts covered with soil, are built there, which were used to expand farming land and can be reached by trajineras. Don Julian Santana Barrera was the owner of one of these small islands, one completely decorated with abandoned, eerie dolls. He started decorating the place with these eerie human representations around 1950. Santana was a pleasant man who would always leave Barrio de la Asunción to go to his chinampa to gather his harvest, which he then sold. But little by little, he stopped doing that and moved to the island around 1975, becoming something of a hermit. From that point on, he stopped going down to sell the crops, and this task was taken over by his nephew, Anastasio. Julian confessed why he had started collecting the SINISTER dolls. Supposedly, the man had witnessed a young girl drowning in the swamp's lilies before he could do anything to help. From that moment, the spirit of the girl began to haunt him every night, and the poor man could no longer sleep. So he decided to start collecting dolls from all over, from the trash, the streets, anywhere he could find them, to use them as protection from the evil spirits. Neighbors watched in astonishment as little by little, Julian's chinampa became filled with more and more dolls, some intact, others in pieces. Their heads, limbs, and bodies began to adorn every inch of the island. Julian himself claimed that some of the dolls would appear on the island by themselves, without anyone placing them. According to him, these gloomy little figures kept him company, watched over him, and helped make his crops flourish. The residents of the neighborhood soon began to think that the Island of the Dolls must be cursed. Sometimes the laughter or sobs of the dolls could be heard. This fear of dolls has a name. It's called pediophobia, which is the fear of lifeless representations of the human body. The terror that they might stare at us or get up from their shelf. But what is the cause of this fear? Since ancient times, dolls have been used for magical or macabre purposes. For example, in Japan, there is a festival called Hinamatsuri, or the Doll Festival, where dolls are used to trap demonic spirits and prevent them from coming into contact with the owners. In voodoo culture as well, ragdoll figures are used as a bridge for curses. Without going too far, there are many adaptations of horror stories where the tension is created by a porcelain doll that moves, is cursed, and threatens the lives of the protagonists. The 2014 film Annabelle, or its 2017 prequel, Annabelle Creation, deal with the theme of demonic dolls. In the 1990s, the Island of the Dolls became a tourist attraction after the Chinampa was declared a World Heritage Site in 1987. People began visiting the island, even making wishes and offering gifts to one of the dolls, Julian's favorite, La Moneca, hoping their wishes would be granted. One day, Julian Santana and his nephew went fishing together, as they often did, but that day Julian told a new story. He mentioned a beautiful but dangerous mermaid in the lake who had been courting him for some time. The beautiful sea creature grew more persistent, always trying to trick him into going with her. But he didn't need to worry, as he would sing to her to make her leave him alone. That very same day, when Anastasio returned from selling the harvest, he found poor Don Julian dead on the shore. The man had suffered a heart attack, right where he had told his nephew that the mermaid was courting him. From that moment on, Anastasio took over the Chinampa. It might seem like the mysterious events on the island would end there, but that wasn't the case. Julian's nephew claimed to have heard the dolls move on their own, from one place to another. Sometimes they would cry, and he would hear his uncle talking to them to calm them down. Tourists continued to visit the island, making more offerings. Many of these offerings were more dolls, which Anastasio continued placing on the island in honor of his late uncle. Some visitors weren't so grateful, and instead of leaving a new doll on the island or doing anything at all, they would take a doll as a souvenir. But these people ended up abandoning the dolls due to the terror they caused them. And not long after, they died as a result of accidents. The Island of the Dolls has been a major tourist spot for years. Visitors say the place is both beautiful and eerie. Many of them also claim that some of their wishes were granted after praying to La Moneca. Would you dare to visit it? It is very common to hear stories about houses inhabited by spirits, but it happening on a plane is no longer so normal. The year was 1979, and the company Aerolíneas Argentinas acquired its second jumbo jet, the Boeing 747-200 model, a giant 71 meters long and weighing 174 tons, capable of transporting up to 480 passengers. Its license plate was LVMLO, which is why it was known by all as Malo, which means bad in Spanish. It operated until 1983, when it began to serve other companies such as Metro International or Federal Express, until it returned to Aerolíneas Argentinas in 1990, where it continued to fly for the rest of the decade. At this time, there was a cabin crew member passionate about her profession who had a very special affection for this ship. She was very religious, and she coincided that the Malo had made its first flight on December 8, 1978, Day of the Virgin in Argentina. So much so that when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, aware that she was going to die, she worked alone on this plane for the rest of her days. She passed away a few hours after her last flight. Some months later, when the Malo was being checked in the hangars of the Ezeiza Airport, Buenos Aires, a blurred and transparent figure appeared to two mechanics in the rear cargo hold. After the initial scare, the ship was thoroughly searched, but nothing was found. On another occasion, when it was undergoing an overhaul, the cleaning staff working alone in the upper cabin heard some strange noises in the first-class section. One of them decided to go down to inspect, and in the middle of the central corridor was a ghostly female figure, dressed in the uniform of the company. It was then that the legend about the enchanted plane and the spirit of the flight attendant that inhabited it became popular. But the mysterious events didn't end there. In the year 2000, during a stopover at the Barajas airport in Madrid, a couple of mechanics from the AirPlus company also fled the plane in terror. Later, they confessed to one of the flight commanders that while they were working in the passenger cabin, they had noticed the presence of a strange entity. Finally, after many incidents, in mid-2001, the Malo was withdrawn from service and parked outdoors on an esplanade of the Ezeiza airport to serve as a source of spare parts for other aircraft of the company. However, when they began to disassemble the engines, 5 mechanics heard loud noises inside the forward hull. They checked it thoroughly and found nothing. But when they returned to activity, once again they heard strange noises, this time inside the cabin. Since there were no stairs and the access doors were closed, one of them decided to take a crane up to the row of windows. Glancing inside, he froze to see a flight attendant walking down the aisle. Once again, the aircraft was searched from top to bottom, but nothing was found. It gave the impression that the plane was trying to scare anyone who came near it, or as if someone who was very fond of that ship wanted to prevent it from disappearing.
The Sablinskaya cave is a set of underground tunnels that are located just 40 kilometers from St. Petersburg, the second largest city in Russia. A black legend weighs on it with hundreds of victims and disappearances, attributed to the existence of an evil force within it. Interest in this cave arose in the 18th century, when it was discovered that it contained a large amount of silica sand, which is used to make glass. Its extraction turned it into an underground labyrinth that exceeds 7 kilometers, with flooded lakes and dozens of large rooms connected by corridors several meters high. Many miners lost their lives there due to poor working conditions. Legends of extraterrestrial beings began to emerge, which made the workers disappear. They also described the presence of a lady dressed in white, with her face wrapped in a shroud and a candle in her hands, constantly crying for the deceased miners. Others claimed to meet an old man with a gray beard, who warned them not to enter certain galleries that later ended up collapsing. Finally, in 1924, the extraction works were abandoned. But the mines and caves remained there, serving as a refuge for criminals, fugitives, or homeless people, until the outbreak of World War II in the 1940s. Nazi troops began the invasion of Russian lands, and Hitler's first major objective was to completely destroy the city of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, to make it serve as a moral blow to the rest of the country. German troops arrived at its gates in September 1941, but the Russian army and population of nearly 3 million bravely withstood the attack. This infuriated the Führer, who hatched a heartless plan to bring down the city, surround it, cut off all supplies, and wait for the population to starve. To this was added the arrival of winter, and the inhabitants had to endure temperatures of -30 degrees without electricity or heating. The corpses began to accumulate in the streets, with a mortality that reached 25,000 people a day. People ate grass, glue, boiled wallpaper, or leather belts. They ate the paper from the books, and what little bread there was adulterated with sawdust. It was a matter of time before cannibalism took over the city. Survivors reported seeing corpses whose buttocks or part of their legs had been ripped off, and others who had their viscera removed. The living were even attacked, and entire neighborhoods were controlled by violent groups of cannibals. When the city was finally liberated after a 2.5-year siege, some 1,400 people were accused of cannibalism, and more than 300 were executed. Some of them managed to escape. For them, caves like Sablinskaya were the perfect place to hide. In the 1970s, when the authorities wanted to rehabilitate the place, they found a chilling discovery. Nearly 200 people lived hidden there, organized in clans with names like the Sadists, the Sticks, or the Kamikazes. The authorities evacuated them from there, but it's believed that some escaped again and took refuge in the depths. Currently, official figures say that every year about 20 people disappear inside the Sablinskaya cave and its surroundings. Some experts point out that the cause could be the danger of the flooded areas, some with quicksand, but the truth is that no remains of the disappeared have been found inside. The police go further and believe that those responsible would be former inhabitants of the caves that still remain there. But the Sablinskaya galleries are so extensive and intricate that catching someone is almost impossible. For their part, the members of the clans that once lived there say that many of their companions also disappeared without a trace. They attributed it to creatures that lived underground. Finally, the authorities have had no choice but to cordon off the area and define which parts of the cave can be visited, always under strict safety regulations, and with the premise of never leaving the group or exploring unauthorized areas. In one of them is the gallery baptized as Cannibal Room by its former inhabitants. It is decorated with an abundance of skulls, and an ominously decorated doll hangs from its ceiling. A few meters away, the decapitated head of a female mannequin also hangs upside down. And at the exit of the room, a tomb, the only one in the entire cave, where the remains of one of the people who died inside under strange circumstances rest. Nobody knows who buried her. They only left an iron cross in the grave. Today it is unknown if they are ghosts, creatures from the underworld, or a clan of cannibals. The only thing certain is that something evil and unknown awaits in the depths of the Sablinskaya cave for anyone who dares to approach. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.